Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'm going to speak to you about personal heraldry in Spanish North America, and specifically some of the historical resources that can illuminate the Spanish armigers who colonized those parts of Spain's empire that now form the south and west of the United States. I am by no means an expert in this field. There is much that I don't know about Spanish heraldry, and what little I do know may tend to be incorrect. Hopefully whatever errors I will make will spur those more knowledgeable than myself to explore this topic more fully. I believe that any attempt to understand the history of personal heraldry in the United States should take into account the influence of Iberian heraldry. Spain's role in the history of colonial America is well known. Spaniards were the first Europeans to set foot in over 20 different U.S. states. St. Augustine, Florida, founded by the Spanish in 1565, is the oldest permanent European settlement in the United States. And by the end of the 18th century, vast portions of what is today the United States were ruled by Spain. Here we can see a map showing the political boundaries in North America circa 1800. In that year, however, the Louisiana Territory reverted to French control. In 1819, Spain agreed to hand over Florida to the U.S., and by 1821, Spanish rule in what is today Texas, New Mexico, California, and elsewhere ended with Mexican independence. What is less understood is the role of personal heraldry in Spanish colonial America. For 250 years, thousands of Spanish settlers, soldiers, explorers, and clergy made new homes for themselves in what is now the United States. Which of these individuals were armigerous? What arms did they bear? And how did they display their arms? What historical sources can help us answer these questions? I also believe that any attempt to popularize heraldry in modern-day America should take into account the Spanish heraldic tradition. As of the year 2013, 17% of all U.S. residents were Hispanic or Latino, and the U.S. Census Bureau projects that by the year 2060, this percentage of the population will rise to 31%. Historical research into the Spanish colonial heraldic tradition should serve to offer these Americans a place at the table, so to speak. Spanish armigers can be found among the ranks of the titled nobility, untitled nobles or hidalgos, and commoners. Titled nobles were some of the wealthiest individuals in the Spanish colonial world. Their footprint in the historical record is large and out of proportion to their relatively low numbers. On the other hand, commoners, though numerous, were relatively poor and not as well documented. Can the untitled nobility, then, offer a window through which we can begin to answer some of the questions about personal heraldry in Spanish colonial America? Were untitled Spanish nobles even present in colonial America? And did they leave any evidence in the historical record that has heraldic content? As it turns out, Spanish colonial authorities used offers of ennoblement along with cash incentives, land grants, and commercial monopolies to encourage settlement along the frontier. Spanish law and custom made hidalgo status very attractive to commoners during the 17th and 18th centuries. Hidalgos did not have to pay most taxes, and they monopolized municipal offices. They could not be sent to prison for unpaid debts. If sent to jail for other crimes, they could not be tortured or whipped, and if sentenced to death, they had the right to avoid the gallows and have their heads cut off instead. Hidalgos were also forbidden to practice most forms of trade and industry, and this custom could sometimes complicate matters. In 1731, for example, 16 families of commoners from the Canary Islands were induced to settle in what is today San Antonio, Texas. Raised to the status of hidalgos upon arrival, these immigrants quickly alienated the other residents of this tiny community. According to the historian Donald Chipman, quote, "The Canary Islanders, no doubt impressed with their nobility, came to resent the hard work required in tilling the land. In a letter to the king the viceroy advised against sending any more islanders to populate Texas. The viceroy insisted that the transplanted Canary Islanders had to be supervised, fed, clothed, and cared for like infants, unquote. Ennoblement as a means to promote colonization was arguably more successful in neighboring New Mexico. Spanish attempts to colonize New Mexico began in the late 1590s. A royal edict from 1602 decreed that settlers could petition for hidalgo status after a minimum of 5 years of service. A partial translation of the document reads, quote, Don Felipe, by the grace of God, King of Castile, an edict concerning the settlement of the province of New Mexico. Those who have settled and their descendants shall be hidalgos and noble. Doors shall be open and held for them, and they shall enjoy all the honors and privileges due them, and they may do all the things that hidalgos do according to the regulations and the laws and customs of Spain, unquote. The famous 17th century soldier and explorer Don Juan Dominguez de Mendoza was one of the settlers of Spanish colonial New Mexico who petitioned for ennoblement. Dominguez de Mendoza was born in 1631, came to New Mexico as a boy, and earned a reputation as a skilled Indian fighter. He rose to the rank of general and was eventually second in command to the governor of New Mexico. In 1654 and 1681, he participated in 2 major expeditions deep into present-day central Texas. According to one historian, Dominguez de Mendoza, quote, probably saw more of the Texas plains than any previous Spanish explorer, unquote. In 1654, Dominguez de Mendoza was a captain in his mid-20s and had already seen many years of hard fighting in New Mexico against the Apache. In that year he petitioned the governor for ennoblement. Here we can see a picture of that document, which resides at the Lee Library at Brigham Young University. A translation of the petition reads, in part, quote, in the village of Santa Fe, New Mexico, on the 12th day of the month of February, 1654, before Don Juan de Samaniego, governor of these provinces, this petition was presented. Captain Don Juan Dominguez y Mendoza. I appear before your lordship, and I say that I came to these provinces in the year 1642, serving as escort for the treasury, and performing duties for his majesty. In order to relate to your lordship the services which I have completed for his majesty, I offer to give information in such a manner that when seen by your lordship, you shall declare me a hidalgo, and you should have dispatched to me a copy of the royal letters patent. I present as witness Captain Francisco Gomez. He was one of the soldiers who went on campaign to punish the Apache. This witness said that he saw him always well armed and with the flag when he carried dispatches to his excellency. This witness said that he saw Captain Don Juan go to the punitive campaign of Acoma, where he saw him serve and apply himself completely in the face of danger, removing his wounded person with his left shoulder blade broken in 3 places, and another wound on his head, fighting the enemy like a valiant soldier. It is fitting that your lordship should declare him a hidalgo. The governor agreed to Dominguez de Mendoza's petition. Here we can see the governor's reply. A partial translation of the document reads, quote, Don Juan de Samaniego, governor of New Mexico. This is to make it known that Captain Don Juan Dominguez y Mendoza served his majesty well in these provinces, and as a very illustrious soldier in the royal service. In my view, the said petitioner proved to give proof of his said service, and whereas the said Captain Don Juan Dominguez y Mendoza is of the age of 25 years more or less, of good stature, dark complected, black bearded with a small beard, and he has 3 wounds on his left side. The first wound is a sword wound on the shoulder, and 1 finger on the left hand has been severed, and on the same side there is a wound above the knee. all of these having been received in the good services of His Majesty and in his royal name. I declare him a hidalgo and noble person. Captain Don Juan Dominguez y Mendoza, his children and legitimate heirs from today onward forever in all parts of the kingdom and territories of His Majesty, shall enjoy all the rights, privileges, and honors enjoyed by all hidalgos of Castile. Made in the town of Santa Fe, New Mexico, on the 17th day of the month of February, 1654. Was Dominguez y Mendoza armigerous, and if so, what arms did he use? Researchers can look for answers in secondary sources like books and periodicals, or in primary sources in the form of seals, paintings, jewelry, etc. Another possible source of information are legal documents called Cartas Ejuterias de Hidalguía. Here are some photos of miscellaneous cartas from the 16th and 17th centuries. These cartas were produced in the Spanish royal chancery courts and testified to the status of untitled noblemen and women. Since, as we have seen, hidalgos were exempt from paying most taxes, it was in the financial interests of many individuals to claim hidalgo status, regardless of whether or not they actually were noble. Similarly, municipal authorities in Spain and the New World had a financial interest in obtaining tax revenue from as many individuals as possible, regardless of their hidalgo status. New hidalgos, like Dominguez y Mendoza, and their descendants sometimes had to defend their privileges in courts of law. These trials of noble status were called pleitos de hidalguía, and were heard in the Sala de Hijos d'Algo, which was attached to the Royal Chancellery Court of Castile. These courts sat in two Spanish cities, Valladolid and Granada. According to the historian Richard Kagan, quote, a panel of 4 magistrates heard cases filed by hidalgos whose claim to nobility was in doubt. These hidalgos had either to present a royal patent of nobility or produce witnesses willing to swear that they were indeed noble. As one might expect, considerable corruption was involved in these pleitos de hidalguía. Many litigants forged royal patents, the authenticity of which the officials had to determine. More frequently, would-be nobles produced friends and relatives to testify on their behalf. There is also some evidence to suggest that many of the witnesses who participated in these cases were paid professionals, hangers-on who were ready, as long as the price was right, to certify claims to a person's ancient nobility, unquote. Hidalgos at these trials were subject to a legal examination. Inquiries concerning legitimate birth, religious orthodoxy, and ethnic background were made. According to the historian Elisa Ruiz Garcia, the litigants were also asked about their family coats of arms. Perhaps as many as 50,000 cases from these trials of noble status can still be found in the court archives in Valladolid and Granada. Litigants who were successful in defending their hidalgo status were entitled to a final writ called a Carta Ejuteria de Hidalguía. These hidalgos could choose to have their judgments issued on paper or, for an extra fee, on illuminated parchment. The form and style of these cartas generally followed a set pattern and typically included sumptuously illuminated frontispieces, religious iconography, a summary of the lawsuit, genealogical charts, and an order to the royal and municipal authorities to recognize the holder as a hidalgo. Some of these cartas include heraldic decoration, and many featured paintings of the personal coats of arms of the hidalgos themselves. Since these documents were kept by litigants, there is no central repository for these records. Instead, thousands of these cartas survive today in public and private collections around the world. The Library of the Hispanic Society of America in New York City has a collection of over 500 of these documents issued to individuals from both Europe and the Americas. They date from the 15th century to the 19th century and are mostly uncatalogued. Dominguez y Mendoza's descendants obtained one of these cartas in the late 18th century. Here we can see a picture of the title page, which features a painted trophy. This document, also at Brigham Young University, contains, among other things, an elaborate genealogy showing Don Juan Dominguez y Mendoza himself. Beside him is painted the generic arms of Mendoza, which can be blazoned per saltire, vert, and or, the chief and base charged with a bend gules fimbriated or, the flanks charged with the words Ave Maria on the dexter and Gratia Plena on the sinister. Here we can see a picture of this genealogy. This document also contains a quaint and utterly spurious description of the supposed importance of the main colors in the Mendoza arms. A partial translation reads, quote, "The field of gold signifies virtue, justice, mercifulness, and clemency, and it relates to the worldly qualities of nobility, chivalry, wealth, generosity, splendor, pride, love, purity, health, strength, happiness, prosperity, and long life. Those who carry this medal in their coats of arms are obligated to do what is right for the poor and to defend their princes, fighting for them until their last drop of blood is shed. The field of green signifies the virtues of hope, and it relates to the worldly qualities of honor, courtesy, abundance, friendship, land, possessions, and the service and respect which one must offer to his prince. Those who carry this color in their coats of arms are obligated to assist his countrymen and laborers, though particularly he must assist orphans and the poor who are oppressed." Unquote. Here we can see a picture of this document. These documents do not offer any clue as to what arms, if any, Don Juan Dominguez y Mendoza actually used during his lifetime. Indeed, the carta only depicts the generic arms of the recipient's maternal line, and does not allude to his paternal Dominguez ancestry. Their importance is instead as evidence that Hidalgos did settle the American frontier, and that some of their descendants sought to defend their status in Spanish courts. Name indexes have been published for many of the trials of noble status whose case files still survive in Spanish court archives. It may be possible to compare these names against computerized databases, such as the one maintained by the University of Arizona. This database is called Biofile Southwest, and consists of an alphabetical listing of over 19,000 persons living in the greater Southwest during the Spanish colonial period. If even 1% of the 50,000 surviving trials of noble status can be shown to originate from what is today the United States, then we could generate a list of 500 individuals from the colonial period. Such a list would presumably include individuals who were both successful and unsuccessful in defending their claims of nobility. Since the trial records include questions about coats of arms, they might allow us to start answering questions like which colonists were omnivorous, what arms did they bear, and how did they display their arms. Furthermore, collections of surviving cartas in museums, archives, universities, and libraries around the world may contain beautiful period paintings of the coats of arms of some of these colonial Americans who won their trials of noble status. Such information would surely help us better understand the role of personal heraldry in Spanish North America. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.